We have some 3,400 to be precise, empty shops in London, and our key finding has been the lack of urgency in response of the Mayor and the Government to the problems high streets are facing, especially small traders. The Government's not implementing many of the Porter's recommendations, and indeed we saw only recently how little of the Porter's money has actually been spent, even though it's been allocated. One of the recommendations that was in that report we come up again with today is the importance of setting up a landlord register. We've seen action in coordinating high streets with the creation of town teams, but that doesn't address the immediate problem of rents and rates going up. In fact, by delaying the business rates revaluation, the Government has denied small businesses a vital lifeline. The Mayor's made a significant commitment in his manifesto to spend over £200 million regenerating high streets, and the money is coming through, but it's mainly about long-term regeneration. In fact, I was at the North Finchley Outer London Fund event a couple of weeks ago, and you can't say it was entirely successful in the way it proceeded at that time. Firms are struggling to stay open now, may not see the benefit of that money. The Mayor's call for more small business rate relief, but the Government hasn't listened so far. So we're recommending an emergency package of 3 elements, and then more medium and long-term recommendations, and also a few comments about good practice. So the emergency package, first and foremost, we want to see a doubling of the funding for small business rate relief in London. This can be funded by reducing landlords' empty property rate relief from 3 months to 2 months, which of course also provides an incentive for them to re-let the properties as well. That balances out, and London does not get its fair share of the small business rate relief compared to the rest of the country anyway. We want to help small firms renegotiate the terms of their leases so they can get out from under the upward-only rent review clauses. So we're proposing a London-wide advice and mediation service funded by the GLA to do this. And time and again on our visits round we heard about these upward-only rent reviews, often backed by personal guarantees from the traders who are locked in. And surely it has to be in the interest of both landlord and trader, if the rents can't be afforded, to renegotiate those rents downwards to a reasonable level to keep the business going and the shop occupied and the rent coming in. We want to see an empty shop register listing the landlord's details of all empty shops, and we think that could be done by making it a condition of receiving empty property rate relief. When we went to Chatswood Road in Hackney, there are some 60 landlords for 80 units. And what was quite interesting, talking to some of the shopkeepers, was that some people actually wanted to open a new premises, wanted to start a new business, but couldn't find the landlord who owned the premises to rent them. They're having real difficulty. So Chatsworth Road is on the cusp. I think it's got a real opportunity to grow, but only if the empty properties are let. And to let the empty properties, you have to know who owns them. Other measures that can be implemented in the medium to long term include a very important one in our view, looking at planning policy and powers for the boroughs to ensure diversity in the high street by putting limits on the growth of betting shops, pawnbrokers, payday loan shops. For example, pawnbrokers over the last 3 years have doubled in number in the high streets of London, and that can't be good for diversity or indeed for trading conditions generally. We think that they should be a separate planning category, and the councils should have power to refuse them if there are too many. We'd like to see more business improvement districts like this one here in Camden Unlimited, and Simon will say a bit more about that shortly, as well as other forms of business collaboration. And I think the Mayor needs to step up his training and support for local groups who want to establish a bid. He should also address fears that bids will replace public services, and that was one of the issues when the Camden one was originally set up and was overcome, by getting TfL and the Met Police to agree baseline service agreements so they're not replacing what should be funded by the taxpayer. We'd like to see a new form of compulsory purchase order for the temporary leasehold of shops. It's not necessary for the council to take over a shop permanently. What we'd like to see is the council having the power to take over an empty shop for a few years on a leasehold basis. That would be cheaper, easier, simpler, and would enable that council then to bring that shop back into a use to increase that diversity and increase occupation on the high street. And better accessibility. The Assembly's reports identifies a range of things to promote walking and cycling to town centres, and of course there's the thorny issue of parking. which I know all too well from the Barnet half of my constituency. We have to recognise high streets are competing with out-of-town centres for motorist business, and one of the suggestions we have, for example, is a free half-hour parking to attract the motorist, but ensure parking spaces keep turning over because you don't want the same space occupied all day by having charges beyond that. And we think TfL should be monitoring the impact of those schemes to see if they are in fact working. And then there's other good practice we identify as well, including pop-up schemes like the very shop we're in today. These are happening in many places, but to make them effective, the emphasis has to be on good quality, sustainability and marketing them to the local community, which is crucial for footfall for the shopping area generally, like this one we're in today. And that's why, in fact, we're here today, because I was absolutely convinced that if we're going to launch a report on a high street, we shouldn't do that from City Hall, we should do it from a successful project which shows what can be done, which is what we're here today to illustrate. And then there's a lot of people suggest that the internet is a threat to the high street. In some respects it is of course a threat, with increasing amounts of shopping being done online. But it's also an opportunity, as other shop owners have demonstrated. Something as simple as a website telling people what they can find on their local high street can be effective, where all the shopkeepers come together for a website for their street as a whole. We have trade bodies all over the place that represent particular industries. This is effectively the same thing. People may be in competition, but they have a collective interest as well. Click and collect is an exciting opportunity to bring shoppers on the high street, where with a good website for a particular shop, the customer can identify what they want to buy online, click and buy it, and then go to the shop to collect it. And when they go to the shop to collect it, no doubt they'll go and have a cup of coffee and contribute to the high street in that way. This is something where the retail industry should work together to get the critical mass they need to keep things going. So overall, I think we're on the cusp. There are many ideas in our report, some of which can be implemented very easily, cheaply and quickly. Others will require legislation. But what is important is that we recognise how urgent it is that something is done about those key issues. The high street can survive, it can thrive, but it does need to change and adapt to modern trading conditions. And I think that's the key message from our report. All is not lost, a lot can be gained, but it does need action.
For me, this report is really timely. What it's doing is it's picking up some of the real problems we're having on our high streets, recognising that the high street can't stay as it is, and coming up with some really good ideas about what we might be able to do to make it work better in the future.